Hi everyone, it's me, Carol. I'm sorry that I can't be with you today, but unfortunately I work on Wednesdays and Fridays mornings, and I've been through a lot this semester and it drained all the energy that I had to do anything other than my professional life. And well, in order to, give a little bit of what I've done in my previous semester studying theater, I would like to share with you a work that I presented on the zoo story. Yes, I was pretty happy to read a play. Like it was very intense to me, and I was baffled by the way the language was used to conduct the story and the way the story was told. So, with no further ado, let me share my screen with you guys and let's get started with a little bit of my reflections on it. So, it's a Marxist overview on the zoo story, and I hope you guys enjoy. Firstly, I would like to talk about Edward Albee. Yes, our author. He is a very interesting person. The title will be there in a minute. He was adopted by a wealthy family. He knew about it. And his family was expecting him to, carry on with a corporate boss, and they wanted him to take care of the family's business, but that's not what he wanted for himself. Yes. For starters, he was openly homosexual since he was 12 years old. Yeah, so that was the beginning of one of the many rebel moments of his life, let's say. He was passionate about writing in school, so he wrote poems, essays, short stories, and a 500-page novel. You know, what teenager would do that just for fun, yeah? He left his house, actually, like a very wealthy mansion at the age of 18, and then he started working, at odd jobs to survive. He became one of us, basically. Uh, and the Zoo Story was the first play he wrote, and he said he wrote the Zoo Story in 3 weeks, and it was premiered in 1959 in Germany. Yes. His career was very prolific in terms of plays, and he was awarded with 3 Pulitzers and many other prizes. Yeah, so if you want, you can research a little about his life. Yeah. A little bit of the historical context of the Zoo Story. Yes, let's recap. The year of its release was 1959, but it's important to talk about some aspects of life in the US. Yeah, so life in the US had this very strong focus on the American dream, American way of life. If you work hard, you get rewarded, and you would get married, have children. Yes, look, the 4 children in the family, and a dog. Yes, so big refrigerator. It was the symbol of success back at the time. Yes, uh, so that was the beginning of the consumerist era in large scale, let's say. Advertisements were on the rise on radio, television, later on. And, you know, um, ever since the crisis in 1929, the American government realized how important it was to keep the wheels of the economy rolling. Having a high rate of consume was one of the ways to promote that growth that the Americans had after the war. Well, apart from that, yes, wealth started to concentrate in the hands of the few, and well, our, you know, how can our working class began to suffer the effects, and Black people, had it worse in the United States. And there were many segregation laws happening. in public and private places. Like you had the restaurants for white people and black people, and water fountains for white people and black people, and buses were, segregated as well. This one, you probably know the story of Rosa Parks. Yeah, she refused to give up her seat to a white man, and she was arrested for that. And many other cases of, racism were blunt in American society. You had the KKK on the rise, and there were many protests, which, you know, were involved in the civil rights movement. Martin Luther King was one of the great men, yes, of that period, and he was a voice of the many Black people who were protesting for better life conditions and, like having equal rights. Yes, so the end of segregation and etc. Also, during that time, you had as a counter reaction, I would say, you had the Cold War alongside with in opposition to civil rights movements. You had a very strong anti-communist speech. Yes, we have to remember that after the war, the Soviet Union was one of the winners. Actually, they killed 80% of the Allies, and like the Allies' enemies. Yeah, so they did most of the job. They were there in Berlin when the war was finished. And well, the thing is, this caused an interest in socialism in America, also because, like the social gap between the rich and the poor was getting bigger. And to counterattack this influence, the government and the mass media began to implement anti-communist propaganda, like we have anti-left propaganda today. The same was happening in the 1950s. And as you can see in the picture, it all mixed with racism. So you have posters like race mixing is communism, and this picture happened in Little Rock, Arkansas. And there was, because this was one of the first schools that ended segregation among students. So Black students started to go to the white people's schools, and that caused, outrage among white people. And they, that like the kids had to be protected by the National Guard because these people were very hostile. Yes, and this advertisement here, yes, I pointed to the right direction, shows something very similar to what Escola Sem Partido is doing nowadays. Yes, how red is the little red schoolhouse? So you can see there is this communist soldier with a syringe applying red ink in a school. Supposedly teachers are becoming communists. Have you ever heard of such accusations here in Brazil on the over the last few years? So that's where they got their inspiration. Yes, so the anti-communist feeling during that time was very strong. And guess what? Edward Albee was, very leftist, very, I don't know if he was a communist or not, but he was surely a leftist. And because he was homosexual, he also was in favor of minorities, including Black people, and the minorities always had a place in his place, and that includes a very small part, but it was still there on the story at the zoo. Yes. Well, after giving you this very basic historical context, I would like to address the issue of Marxism. Yes, because like I said, this video will present a Marxist perspective of the play, and I would like to talk very briefly about some theoretical aspects of it. Yeah, so So the Marxist theory, they have their own vocabulary about certain topics. Yes. Why is that? Because Marx and Engels studied the early industrial society in England. They were analyzing the impacts of the Industrial Revolution, basically. And they saw they saw the consequences of the implementation of such uh, means of production. Yeah, first you had the surplus. Yes, in Portuguese we would call this mais-valia. And this is the gap between what the worker produces versus what the worker gets as a salary. Yes, the salary is just a very, very small part of the net income that he or she produces. And of course, this larger part stays with the owner of the factory, the business, or whatever, because this is how they get their profit. Yes. And because of that, yeah, the salaries were very low and the working conditions were horrible. Yes, you had a class conflict. Why get so little working so hard? Yes, or why do they have to work like more than 12 hours a day with women, pregnant women, children, all sorts of labor risks? So surely you had that class conflict between the bourgeoisie and the working class. Yes, the owners of the means of production versus the proletariat. Also, yes, Karl Marx talked about the ownership of means of production. And the only true capitalists are the ones who have that. Private property is not about personal belongings. Yes, you may have a house, you may have your own, yes, lot, but that doesn't mean you are a capitalist, because the only way you are a capitalist if your property becomes profitable. Yeah, so if you own something that gives you money and you don't have to work for it. And also, you have the small bourgeoisie and the true one. Yes, that would mean that, for example, the true bourgeoisie in Brazil would be like the ultra billionaires with, like the very big business, very restricted number of families. Yeah, so the 0.001% would be part of this class, while you have the small bourgeoisie and the working class that ranges from, the very simple industrial workers and, domestic workers up until soccer players. Yes, the working class salary ranges a lot nowadays. And like I said, this profit focused economy generates inequality, because of course, if the more you profit, the less you have to give, the less you need to share the profit with your workers. So the lower the salary, the more money you stay with. That's kind of obvious. And that economy generates inequality in a exponential rate, because the rich get richer, the poor get poorer. Yes, it's a natural consequence. And the 1950s began to have that impact because the industrialization in the United States was becoming more intense. Yes. Marx's initial works reflecting on this material conditions and social expression of capitalism were expanded to different areas of knowledge, including literature. Yes. That means that Marx, other people look at what Marx wrote and said, oh, that makes a lot of sense. How can this be applied to other areas of knowledge? Yes, for one of the earliest Marxist theories on literature was the professor Georg Lukács. I don't know how to say his name either in Portuguese or in English. Sorry, guys, but I will mention him later on very briefly. Yes. And one thing I forgot to mention during my explanation of the Marxist theory is how Marx saw the the economical and non-economical activities of society. He would split into the base and the superstructure. I will give you a further explanation on that. So basically, we have the economic base, which is the dominant mode of production. Yes, you have relations of production and productive forces. Yes, so I would just leave you there, the elements. I will not talk any further about it. You can pause the video at any moment and observe what is there. Yeah, all the text there. And all these economic bases, forces, let's say, they shape the superstructure, everything that is not directly connected to the production. Yes, and we are around here. Yes, art, stories, yes. And notice that science, philosophy are also part of the ideas realm of society. Then these ideas are spread through institutions, yes. They are mediated by ideology, and we all live within a controlled state. Yes, and I think this chart is very interesting. If you would like to have it, you can ask me. I will be very happy to share with you. Yes, so basically, this is important to understand why Marxists say that the economy shapes art, why the class you belong to will be a part of your writing. And Adorno says that on his famous book, Aesthetic Theory. Yes, but I will not go into it very deeply, but basically there is a part in it that he says that the art cannot deny the origin of the artist, basically. Even as a little bit of you will be there somehow, yes, and you can see that in Edward Albee's story, yes. The class he chose to belong to is always there with him. And also, I mean, the class he chose to belong to because he abandoned his wealthy life, although, of course, he benefited from it later on in life. Yes, he lived in a very big house at the end of his life. So, anyways, I hope that you guys are, learning something new up until here. Now, let's move on with the play analysis itself, right? I really like this cover because it summarizes and it gives a spoiler, of course, but also it shows the dog. I think that the dog is a very interesting element of the story. Yes, so you guys can skip this part in case you've already had the discussion on the play. I don't know where you guys are at this moment, if you saw the play, if you didn't see it. So if you want to skip the introduction and also the plot summary, you guys are more than welcome to. Yes, we have the character. First, I would like to talk briefly about the characters. Yes, it's already, yes, I'm very a clear division of classes and where they belong in society. There is Peter. Yes, Peter is the man sitting on the bench. He belongs to the upper middle class. He works as a publisher, and he has the American dream family, a wife, two daughters, cats and parakeets. Yes, so and he basically goes to the park to relax on Sundays whenever the weather allows him. He says it's a place where, he belongs. And that's an important aspect of his, right? His attachment to that part of the park. On the other hand, you have Jerry. Jerry belongs to the lower class, and he is dressed like carelessly, like he is not exactly he's not exactly poor, but he belonged to the lower class, definitely. Peter confused him with an intellectual who lived in Greenwich. Greenwich would be like, how would I say, the San Francisco area here in Curitiba, maybe. But actually, Jerry lived in a place that would remind Boqueirão or Sítio Cercado, very far away from the economic center of the city. He has no family and he doesn't own a house. Yeah, he lives in a very chic, dingy part of town, like I said. He could be considered an underdog. And at first, he went to the park to go to the zoo. Yes. And this is how the play begins. I've been to the zoo or something like that. I didn't memorize the lines. And well, that's the plot summary, right? It's Sunday afternoon at Central Park in New York City. Yes, Peter is reading his book as usually, and Jerry approaches him announcing he had been to the zoo. Peter, he begins to talk to Jerry because I don't think he has contact with any other people of his own class. And as Peter and Jerry talk, Jerry makes deductions about Peter. Yes, he's a very observant man and he's clever. So he makes deduction and he starts to make questions that make Peter very uncomfortable. And Jerry seems to enjoy a little bit of that, I guess. And after that, Jerry talks about some aspect of his life. And I don't know if he does it on purpose or not, but that scandalizes Peter a lot. Yeah, Jerry can see right through it, and he despises that attitude of Peter because Peter sees himself superior because he has more money throughout the conversation. And Jerry talks about the dog because the dog annoys him. The dog bites him and he wants to kill the dog. And then Peter says that this is very immoral, which is the tragic irony of the play, I think, because Jerry didn't kill the dog. Yeah, he regretted having wished to kill the dog. And the conversation continues. Jerry talks more about his neighbors, yes, a black drag queen and a Puerto Rican family. Yeah, so black, homosexual or not, but drag queen. So one of the minorities that I've mentioned before, Puerto Ricans, Hispanic minorities, all of them poor another minority. I mean, they were the majority, but they were treated as a minority, of course. Well, the conversation goes on and Jerry starts to poke and tickle Peter. And then Peter starts to yell and call the police. He said he has had enough and wishes to leave. But then after Jerry teases Peter, the interaction starts to become aggressive. Peter says that he wants the bench for himself because that's his bench. That's where he sits to relax, and Jerry doesn't have the right to sit on it. And then Jerry starts to provoke even more. He starts fighting with Peter, and then Peter said that he's not going to do it. And then Jerry throws a knife at Peter, and then he stabs Jerry. Yeah, so in the story, absurdly ends like that. And that's why I said it's the tragic irony, because, throughout the whole story, Peter is, the guy that is, like, that feels morally superior, kills Jerry just because of a bench. And I love it when Jerry says that he would never go back there because it's true. But in Peter's mind, his actions become justified because he was defending his property. Yes. And this is something that is hypocrisy of capitalist society. it is not okay to murder, but if you are defending your property, then we open an exception. Stealing a cell phone is wrong, but killing for taking your cell phone back, some people find it acceptable. Yeah, so it's it's how the wheels are rolling now and before even so. Yeah, so why is this here? Oh yes. This sorry guys, this I don't know what happened with the configuration of the PowerPoint. But anyways, here we go. Like I said, there is, when you see the characters, you can see that they are opposites of each other. One of them is the American dream, the other is the underdog. One of them has money, the other doesn't. One of them has two cats and a parakeet, the other almost murders a dog. One has a family, the other has difficulties to keep intimacy with people. Maybe he is undiagnosed with mental illness and he has no tact to interact with people. Maybe because he is a homosexual, he is discriminated. That's not clear, and the reasons could be many. Yes, and I'm not here to speculate about the reasons why Jerry was the way he was, but uh, and then again, the only thing we can analyze and display, because we have so little information about it, are the things that are presented to us. And so I would call them like material aspects, because you have evidence of, you know, such aspects based on what the characters say. It's the only thing we have to build that world of the zoo story. So I would say that the prelude of the class conflict starts when Peter, with the characteristics of Peter and Jerry. Peter is polite, he's modest, quiet, he minds his own business. Like I said, he's the example, the metonym of the American dream, lives in a good part of town, attached to his bench, and, you know, he's got the moral principles, while Jerry, curious and clever. Yes, I don't think that that's a very desirable characteristic for the working man, the classic one that has to be on the assembly line. Even at some schools, I would say that the production of knowledge follows an assembly line, and teachers, it's better to teachers not to innovate much. Yes, Jerry is loud, careless, provocative. He's not attached to material goods. This is something that I didn't write there, but it's something that is quite obvious, because he's not an accumulator of, material goods. He likes to have intimate conversations, like he pierces through the hypocrisy veil of the bourgeois society. Yeah, that's why Peter feels so annoyed with him, uncomfortable. Also, he does, like I said, he doesn't have many human bonds. His parents were gone, and apparently the parents were not good parents. He's never had, intimacy other than 11 days with a teenage boy older than him. He lives with minorities, and he's open about moral ambiguities. Yes, one of the things that the bourgeoisie doesn't accept is to admit their own moral ambiguities. They keep saying that they are who they are because they deserve where they are, because they work hard for it. Yes. And the class conflict is one of the pillars of the capitalist society. And private property is and one of the other pillars is having the right to defend your private property. Yeah, so that's why having the rights to bear weapons is one of the constitutional rights that some Americans say that is fundamental, because how can you protect your own land if you don't have your own gun? Yes, I lived a bit in the south of US, so I can simulate the accent a bit. Peter's annoyance is the upper class annoyance with where people, like you see through the conversation that he wants to. At the same time, he feels curious, and I think that's part of the reason why the story is called the story at zoo. And I think the zoo is there because that is the experience Peter wanted to reach. If you remember, in the end if you read the play, yes, there is a part in which he says that he wanted to go to the zoo to see how humans interacted with animals and animals with animals, but then he said that his experience was incomplete because animals were caged. Yes, and even without the cages, humans are caged in the story. Yes. They are caged in their houses, they are caged in the persona they display in a capitalist society. Yes, and uh, they're caged in their jobs because unless you are the owner of the means of production, you cannot stop working. Yes. And I think that another aspect of the Marxist theory that appears on the play, but this is my perception. I haven't seen any articles about it, but I think that Peter starts to lose his false consciousness of the world with Jerry. Jerry was this window. He opened Peter's eyes, and Peter did not like what he sees. He becomes nauseated with the truth. And this nausea is one of the feelings of existentialism. Yes, everything is connected, right? Anyways, it's something that is connected to the Marxist concept of ideology. Yes, Peter starts to see that the way he sees the world is mediated by the bourgeoisie. Yes, and its ideology. Well, let me see. I think that's pretty much almost the end of my discussion with you guys. All this part of the things that I said here were inspired on this article from, let me see his name here, Márcia Aparecida da Silva de Deus. He mentioned that Edward Albee was reluctant to accept the title of an absurdist, but people attributed this to him because, one, he was contemporary to Samuel Beckett, and there was another play of his being released at the same time of the zoo story. And also some of the characteristics of the dialogues, right? They were non-dialogical at some of the times. And the development of the story is not very obvious. It's a bit cryptic. Nothing really goes on, but the development is very intense. And also there is a sense of incompleteness. We don't know, there are many gaps in the story. We have to make deduction of those gaps. We have to choose a way to interpret. And this multiplicity of interpretation can lead to the creation of a pastiche, a product. Yes, remember I told you that I was going to talk a little bit about Lukács. Yes, the author of this article mentions that the power of ideology may lead to a false view of the world, yes, and therefore a false view of the play. Some people gave absurd interpretations to the zoo story. One of them said that it was an unsuccessful uh, uh, pickup line. Pickup line between, you know, a homosexual man and a heterosexual man. Another one said that it was connected to the sacrifice of Jesus, and other people think that the conflict is more psychological than material. Yes. And then when you ignore the political aspect of the play, it it loses its sense of nonconformity. Yes, and I think that Edward Albee was uh, openly critical about the upper class and its, you know, and its domain over the United States and the world. And that's the end of it, guys. This article I read is, you know, was the spine of my presentation. And of course, the play itself. I would like to thank you very much for your attention, and I hope you guys had a great semester. And if you guys want to talk to me, feel free. Yes, you have my contacts. Bye.